Can you believe it? They actually towed my precious rescue animals and then slapped me with a staggering $400 fine, all because I wouldn't buckle and join their high and mighty homeowners association. Honestly, they never expected a small-time farmer like me to dig deep and expose their entire corrupt operation. Think about it. What would you do if some power-hungry neighbor tried to snatch the land your family has owned and cherished for generations? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. It all started one morning. I sprinted across my muddy yard, still in my pajamas, when I heard Buttercup, my miniature pony, making these awful scared noises. Unbelievably, a huge tow truck, boldly painted with county enforcement on the side, was backing right up to my barn. And get this, it was only 7 a.m. Seriously, who shows up at someone's farm that early? Hey, stop right there. What in the world do you think you're doing? I yelled, nearly wiping out on the slick ground as I rushed toward them. Immediately, 3 people in matching navy polo shirts spun around. The woman leading the pack had perfect hair, defying the wind, and clutched a clipboard like it was some kind of weapon. "You must be Ava Miller," she stated, her eyes flicking down to my chicken print pajama pants as if they were utter garbage. "I'm Brenda Sterling, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. You've blatantly ignored our notices for 3 months now." Baffled, I blinked. "What notices? And what homeowners association? I don't belong to any HOA. My family has owned this farm for over 40 years. Brenda's fake smile never quite reached her eyes. "Well, Ava, the county rezoned this entire area last quarter. Consequently, your property is now officially part of our community, which means you must follow our rules." She thrust a thick envelope at me. "Consider this your final warning regarding unauthorized livestock." My stomach plummeted as I tore it open. Inside, I found a bill for $2,300 in back dues and, even worse, a notice demanding that all my farm animals be removed immediately. "This is absolutely ridiculous," I exclaimed, clutching the papers, my hands starting to shake. "You can't just unilaterally decide my farm belongs to your fancy neighborhood. I was here first." "Actually, we can," a tall man in an expensive suit interjected, stepping out from behind the tow truck. "I'm Richard Sterling with Willow Creek Development, LLC. The county commissioners fully approved our petition to incorporate all properties within these new boundaries." He smoothly unfolded a map, revealing my 5 acres completely engulfed by their sprawling new development. It hit me then. My farm was suddenly an island adrift in a sea of cookie-cutter houses that had sprung up seemingly overnight. Houses whose owners clearly wanted nothing to do with the sights or smells of actual farm animals. "Look, Ms. Miller," Brenda said, pointedly checking her diamond-crusted watch, "we've given you ample time to comply. Your grandfather clause unfortunately expired when the district lines were redrawn. Therefore, today, we are authorized to remove all non-compliant animals." Just then, 2 men in work uniforms began approaching my barn, the peaceful home to my 6 rescue chickens, 3 goats, and 2 miniature ponies for years. My dog, Buddy, started barking wildly, sensing the imminent danger. "You can't take my animals. That's stealing," I cried, desperately blocking the barn door with my body. "It's not stealing, it's enforcement," Brenda retorted coolly, handing me an official-looking document bearing a county seal. "This order authorizes the removal of prohibited livestock. You can retrieve them from the county facility after paying your outstanding HOA violations." Panic surged through me as I quickly scanned the paper. It looked terrifyingly real, even signed by a Commissioner Vance. How could this possibly be happening? "I'm calling the sheriff," I declared, fumbling for my phone with trembling fingers. "Go right ahead," Richard Sterling smirked. The sheriff's department is fully aware of today's enforcement action. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Brody arrived. I explained the whole nightmarish situation, fully expecting him to put a stop to this madness. Instead, he looked distinctly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Ava, but their paperwork appears to be in order. The county did rezone this area." He lowered his voice slightly. "There's nothing I can do officially right now." I couldn't believe my ears. "Tom," I pleaded, using his first name, "you've known me since high school. These animals are my life." "Get proper legal advice, Ava," he whispered urgently, before turning and walking back to his patrol car. Meanwhile, the workers had already callously loaded my terrified chickens into cages. My oldest goat, Daisy, bleated in sheer terror as they dragged her from the barn. "Stop! Please, at least let me help so they're not so scared," I begged, tears streaming down my face. Brenda, completely unmoved by my distress, simply checked items off her clipboard. "You have 30 days to bring your property into compliance with HOA standards. That includes removing that eyesore of a barn, painting your house an approved color, and installing proper landscaping." When they reached for Buttercup, my sweet 17-year-old rescue pony suffering from arthritis, I completely lost it. "He's too old to be moved like this. Please, he needs special care." "Rules are rules," Brenda replied coldly. Helplessly, I watched as they loaded my beloved animals into various vehicles. Neighbors from the new houses gathered on their perfectly manicured lawns, just staring. Not a single one offered a word of support or help. Before driving away, Brenda handed me yet another paper. "Your total violations now come to $400. Pay within 2 weeks, or we'll place a lien on your property." As the trucks disappeared down my long driveway, carrying away my frightened animals, I noticed Richard Sterling linger behind, taking photos of my property from different angles. Something about his smug, satisfied expression sent a shiver down my spine, making my blood run cold. What weren't they telling me? What were their real plans for my family's farm? Sleep was impossible that night. The haunting silence from my empty barn, where comforting animal sounds should have been, echoed unnervingly. My loyal dog, Buddy, kept searching the property, utterly confused about where his friends had vanished. Instead of sleeping, I stayed up all night, frantically researching online, trying desperately to understand how any of this could possibly be legal. At sunrise, I drove to the county animal facility, a cold, sterile concrete building lined with chain-link kennels. The acrid smell of bleach burned my nostrils as I approached the front desk. "I'm here about the farm animals brought in yesterday from Willow Creek," I explained to the bored-looking clerk. She typed something into her computer. "Miller animals? Yes, we have them. The release fee is $400 plus $75 per day for boarding charges." $400? My voice cracked. "That's my entire emergency savings. Can I at least see them?" The clerk curtly pointed towards a viewing area. My heart shattered, seeing my animals confined in tiny pens clearly meant for dogs and cats. Poor Buttercup couldn't even turn around properly in his cramped space. Daisy kept calling out with frightened bleats. "They need proper housing. These are farm animals," I protested vehemently. "Not my department," she shrugged dismissively. "They'll be put up for adoption in 14 days if the fees aren't paid." I left the building shaking, with a mixture of anger and despair. It was becoming clear. They were counting on me not having enough money. This wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was a calculated move to force me out. Instead of heading home, I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk looked mildly surprised when I requested all rezoning documentation pertaining to Willow Creek from the past year. That's quite a lot of paperwork, she warned. I've got time, I replied grimly, settling in at a nearby table. 3 painstaking hours later, I found something decidedly strange. The rezoning petition had indeed been submitted just 6 months prior, but perplexingly, all the required resident notifications were dated only 3 weeks back, far too late for any meaningful community input as mandated by law. Even more suspiciously, Commissioner Vance had apparently fast-tracked the approval, overriding environmental concerns previously raised by county staff. I meticulously photographed every single page with my phone. Next, I headed to the local library to use their public computer. A quick internet search revealed a startling connection. Commissioner Vance had received substantial campaign donations from Willow Creek Development LLC, Richard Sterling's company. Returning home, I nearly crashed into a landscaping truck brazenly parked in my driveway. 3 workers were already measuring my front yard. "What are you doing on my property?" I demanded sharply. A worker nonchalantly handed me a paper. "HOA pre-approved landscaping assessment. Says here your non-compliant vegetation needs removal." I snatched the paper furiously. "Get off my land right now. I haven't authorized any work whatsoever." They left, albeit reluctantly. But as they drove away, I noticed Brenda Sterling watching intently from her car, parked just down the street. She was actively taking notes, undoubtedly documenting more supposed violations. I desperately needed help. I immediately called my old high school friend, Megan Hayes, who now worked as an investigative reporter at the local newspaper. "Megan, you won't believe what's happening to me," I started, pacing frantically around my kitchen as I recounted the entire ordeal. "Ava, this sounds seriously fishy," she responded gravely. "Fast-tracked rezoning, questionable campaign donations, no proper notification. Do you mind if I poke around? This might be much bigger than just your farm." Later that evening, an unexpected knock at my door revealed an elderly woman I'd never met before. "I'm Mrs. Peterson," she said nervously. "I live in the new development. I saw what they did with your animals. It's just not right." Surprised but grateful, I invited her in. "I bought my house last year," Mrs. Peterson explained, "primarily because the sales brochure explicitly promised pastoral views overlooking established farmland. Your farm," she emphasized, "was actually a major selling point." She continued, "Then, just last month, they railroaded Brenda's election as HOA president in a meeting that half the residents weren't even properly notified about. Wait a minute. They used my farm to sell their houses and now they want to get rid of it? The sheer audacity was unbelievable." "There's more," Mrs. Peterson added, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "They've already raised our HOA fees twice since taking over. Anyone who complains gets targeted with nitpicky violation notices. And just yesterday at the grocery store, I overheard Richard Sterling talking excitedly about Phase 2 of the development, luxury homes planned precisely where your property currently sits. A cold, sickening realization washed over me. They weren't just harassing me about trivial rules. Their ultimate goal was to seize my land. Later that night, I spread everything out on my kitchen table: county documents, HOA notices, property maps. The disturbing pattern became chillingly clear. Richard Sterling's company had systematically purchased all the land surrounding my farm, developed it, created an HOA they completely controlled, and were now ruthlessly using that power to force me to sell. I was trying to figure out my next steps when headlights suddenly swept across my window. A truck was pulling up outside, peering cautiously through the curtains. I saw Richard Sterling himself stepping out, accompanied by another man I didn't recognize. They began walking the perimeter of my property, pointing and discussing something while consulting papers. Grabbing my phone, I quietly started filming them from different windows as they trespassed around my barn and outbuildings. When they reached my storage shed, Richard actually tried the door handle. Furious, I flipped on the bright outdoor lights and threw open the window. "This is private property. Leave immediately or I'm calling the sheriff." They jumped, clearly startled at being caught red-handed. "Just conducting a routine inspection," Richard called back, attempting smoothness. "HOA bylaws permit property evaluations." At 11:00 p.m., without any notice? "I don't think so," I retorted, holding up my phone pointedly. "I've recorded everything. Now get off my land before I press charges for trespassing." The men hastily retreated to their truck, but Richard paused before getting in. "You can't win this, Ava," he sneered. "We've invested millions in Willow Creek Estates. The county commissioners are firmly on our side. Your little farm is just a speed bump in our development plan." After they finally left, I reviewed the video I'd captured. A chill ran down my spine when I noticed what they were carrying. Not just papers, but what looked disturbingly like preliminary construction plans with my property clearly outlined in red. I locked all my doors, suddenly feeling incredibly vulnerable on the land that had always been my sanctuary. How far would these ruthless people really go to get what they wanted? And who else might be entangled in their corrupt scheme? My hands still shook as I watched the taillights of the animal control van disappear down my driveway. They had taken everything: my chickens, my goats, even sweet old Buttercup, who'd been my faithful companion for 12 years. I collapsed onto my porch steps, clutching Brenda's outrageous bill for $400 in bogus violations. "They can't just do this," I whispered to myself, wiping away angry tears. But a sickening seed of doubt crept in. Maybe, just maybe, they could. Sleep was utterly elusive that night. Instead, I painstakingly pulled out every single piece of mail the HOA had sent over the preceding months. Something felt profoundly wrong. The rezoning notice, for instance, was dated only 3 weeks ago, yet Brenda had brazenly claimed it was already final and legally binding. At first light, I drove back to the county records office. The clerk raised her eyebrows when I specifically asked about my property again. "That's odd," she murmured, pulling up my file on her computer. "Your land was fast-tracked for rezoning just last month. That process usually takes a minimum of 6 months and requires multiple public hearings." My stomach knotted tighter. "Who requested the rezoning?" She turned the screen towards me. "Commissioner Vance signed off on the emergency order." The name hit me like a physical blow. Commissioner Vance, the same man my neighbor had mentioned, played golf every Sunday with Richard Sterling, Brenda's husband. I requested copies of absolutely everything. While the clerk was busy printing the documents, I happened to notice a glossy brochure for the estates at Willow Creek lying on the counter. Idly, I flipped through it, stopping cold when I reached a detailed map of the development. My property sat smack dab in the middle, clearly marked as Future Phase 2, Premium Lakeview Lots. But there was no lake anywhere near my property. "Ma'am," I asked the clerk hesitantly, "does this development have permits for a man-made lake?" She typed briefly into her system. "Yes, approved last month, alongside the rezoning. Construction is scheduled to begin in 60 days. 60 days. The exact time frame Brenda had menacingly given me to bring my property up to their impossible HOA standards. I rushed home, my mind racing, and spread everything across my kitchen table. The pieces clicked together like a sick, twisted puzzle. Richard Sterling's development company had acquired all the surrounding land, likely at suspiciously low prices. Their fancy new houses were selling for triple what they'd paid, all prominently advertising exclusive countryside views, views that directly faced my farm. But the real jackpot, it seemed, would come from Phase 2, once they constructed their artificial lake right where my house currently stood. Those planned waterfront properties would be worth millions. My hands trembled as I meticulously studied the HOA bylaws they'd sent. There it was, on page 43, buried in tiny print. Properties failing to meet community standards after 60 days of notification may be subject to community acquisition through eminent domain proceedings. It became devastatingly clear they weren't just trying to force me to join their HOA, they were actively trying to force me out entirely. The animal seizure wasn't about violations at all. It was a cruel tactic designed to break me financially and emotionally. Driven by a growing sense of dread, I made 3 crucial calls that night. First, to my bank, where I learned, disturbingly, that my mortgage suddenly had a disputed title flag attached to it. Second, to the county tax assessor's office, discovering that my property taxes had mysteriously doubled without any explanation. Third, to my insurance company, only to be informed that my policy was now under review due to agricultural use in a designated residential zone. They were attacking me from every conceivable angle, a coordinated assault. I sat numbly on my empty porch, the spot where Buddy should have been sleeping, peacefully beside me. My family had owned this land for generations. My own grandfather had taught me to ride horses in the very field where Brenda Sterling now envisioned building luxury vacation homes. Suddenly, my phone pinged with an email notification. Interested in your story? Do you have documentation? Megan Hayes, investigative reporter. I'd almost forgotten about the desperate tip I'd sent to the local paper earlier. My fingers hovered over the reply button. If I fought back, truly fought back, what else would they try to take from me? But conversely, if I did nothing, just then, a car slowed on the road outside. Through the darkness, I recognized Brenda Sterling's distinctive SUV. She wasn't just driving past, she was stopping, brazenly taking photos of my property, undoubtedly planning her next move, plotting more fabricated violations. That settled it. My resolve hardened. I hit reply and began typing furiously. I have everything. Anything you need. When can we meet? My kitchen table completely disappeared under stacks of documents as Megan Hayes fired questions at me, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard, pausing only occasionally to push her glasses back up her nose. "Wow, Ava, this is even bigger than I initially thought," she murmured, pointing to the HOA formation papers. "Look closely at these signatures. Half of them are from people who don't even own property in the development yet." "Exactly," and I confirmed, passing her the zoning maps, "and they desperately need my land for their proposed lake. Without it, their entire lucrative Phase 2 project completely falls apart." Megan's explosive story hit the front page on Tuesday morning. Questionable HOA tactics target, historic farm. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. They fined me $800 for planting native wildflowers instead of their mandated approved grass, lamented Mrs. Peterson, the white-haired woman in her 70s who'd bought one of the first homes in the estates. And when I dared to fight back, my car suddenly vanished from my own driveway, towed for improper parking. Mrs. Peterson wasn't alone. By sundown, my living room was crowded with 7 other neighbors, all sharing disturbingly similar stories of harassment and intimidation. Brenda cited me because my bird feeder was supposedly 2 inches taller than the regulations allow, shared Mr. Henderson, a retired teacher. Then, mysteriously, my garbage wasn't picked up for 3 solid weeks. My fence was suddenly declared the wrong shade of brown, added Mrs. Diaz, a young mother bouncing a baby on her hip. Never mind that the paint color had been pre-approved when we built. When I showed Brenda the paperwork, she just smugly said the board had updated aesthetic standards and I'd have to repaint immediately or face $50 a day fines. Most shocking, perhaps, was the testimony of Mr. Chen, who had actually served briefly on the HOA board. "I started asking questions about the budget last month," he whispered nervously. "The very next thing I knew, Richard Sterling was suggesting I had conflicts of interest and should probably resign for the good of the community." That night, we officially formed the Willow Creek Property Rights Alliance. Mrs. Peterson's grandson, Kevin, a bright second-year law student, generously offered to review all our documents. "This is absolutely ridiculous for her," he declared after flipping through the HOA bylaws for just a few minutes. "Half these rules would never hold up in court, and the way they actually formed this association violated at least 6 different procedural requirements." For the first time, a flicker of genuine hope ignited within me. But one critical problem remained unsolved. My precious animals were still gone, languishing in inadequate county kennels while racking up exorbitant boarding fees I simply couldn't afford. The nights without Buddy's warm weight pressed against my leg felt agonizingly long and empty. The following day, determined, I emptied my entire savings account and drove back to the county animal facility. The clerk's eyes widened considerably at the thick stack of bills I placed firmly on the counter. "All of it," I stated clearly. "I'm taking them all home." Watching Buttercup's slow, arthritic trot as they carefully loaded him into a borrowed trailer nearly broke something inside me. His usually glossy coat had dulled noticeably after just a week away from home. Thankfully, a sympathetic farmer located about 20 miles away offered temporary sanctuary. "They can stay here until you sort this mess out," he said kindly, helping unload my frightened, clucking chickens. These HOA people sound like absolute vultures. Back home, I immediately joined an emergency alliance meeting convened in Mrs. Peterson's garage. Kevin, the law student, had made another crucial discovery. The county rezoning completely lacked a required environmental impact study. Furthermore, he explained, spreading detailed maps across a workbench, the water drainage from their proposed artificial lake would directly impact protected wetlands downstream. "We can file for an emergency injunction based on these grounds alone." Our collective spirits soared. With 32 families now actively involved and solid legal footing to stand on, we weren't just a group of angry homeowners anymore. We were organized and empowered. Mrs. Diaz's husband, a talented website designer, quickly built us a web page meticulously documenting every instance of HOA overreach and abuse. Mr. Henderson started a petition that rapidly gathered hundreds of signatures from across the county. Mrs. Peterson's gardening club friends diligently conducted a citizen environmental survey, carefully documenting the threatened wildlife habitats on the proposed lake site. Meanwhile, Megan Hayes prepared a hard-hitting follow-up story, exposing Commissioner Vance's cozy relationship with the Sterlings, including a golf club membership allegedly paid for by Richard Sterling's company. Victory finally felt within reach. Then, disaster struck with sickening speed. I arrived home late one evening to find my front door slightly ajar. A wave of nausea washed over me. Inside, my worst fears were confirmed. My papers were gone. Every crucial document, map and letter vanished. And lying ominously on the kitchen table was a single, chilling notice. Foreclosure proceedings initiated, unpaid property taxes. But I had receipts proving I'd paid those taxes promptly, receipts that were now conveniently missing along with everything else. My phone rang urgently. It was Mrs. Peterson, her voice trembling with panic. "Ava, Someone leaked everything. Brenda just sent out an HOA-wide email addressing our baseless conspiracy theories point by devastating point. She somehow knows all our plans. Before I could even respond, headlights swept across my windows again. 3 imposing black SUVs pulled aggressively into my driveway, doors opening in menacing unison. The county sheriff, Brody, stepped out first, followed closely by Brenda Sterling, her perfect bob haircut, somehow undisturbed by the evening breeze. And standing behind them, clutching a thick folder stamped prominently with the county seal, was Richard Sterling, a deeply satisfied smirk spreading slowly across his face. My hands shook uncontrollably as I stared at the foreclosure notice clutched in my hand. They weren't just trying to take my land anymore. They were trying to steal my home, right now. In a surge of pure adrenaline and rage, I ripped the notice down and slammed my front door so hard the windows rattled violently. No more playing nice. No more being the victim. I immediately called Megan Hayes. "They're coming after my house now," I choked out, my voice cracking with emotion. "But I have proof I paid those taxes. This is fraud." "Ava, this is exactly what we needed," Megan replied, surprising me with her intensity. "We've finally got them on paper, committing actual fraud. Meet me at the coffee shop downtown in 20 minutes. Now." Megan arrived with her laptop already open, a determined gleam in her eye. "Breaking news," she announced, turning her screen toward me. The headline made my jaw drop. "Willow Creek corruption, HOA president and county officials linked to land grab scheme." Her relentless investigation had uncovered dozens of incriminating text messages exchanged between Commissioner Vance, the complicit county clerk, and the Sterlings. Unbelievably, they had been meticulously planning this hostile takeover for over a year, targeting not just me, but 5 other longtime property owners whose land they coveted for their expansion. "Your tax receipts, Ava, prove they deliberately falsified county records," Megan explained grimly. "That's a felony." My phone instantly buzzed with call after call as the explosive story spread like wildfire. Neighbors I'd never even met offered heartfelt support. 3 different lawyers contacted me proactively, offering to help fight back. But the most shocking call came from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Miller, this is Harold Davis. I live next door to the Sterlings," said a nervous, reedy voice. "Listen, I've been secretly recording their HOA meetings for months. They've been planning this whole thing in clandestine executive sessions held after the regular meetings officially end." I gripped my phone tighter, my knuckles white. "Do you have proof?" "Better than proof," he whispered conspiratorially. "I have Brenda Sterling, clear as day on tape, saying they'd use whatever means necessary to force the old farm lady out. And I have Richard Sterling laughing about how they'd make an absolute fortune once they get that eyesore farm rezoned for luxury homes." I met Mr. Davis that afternoon, in the quiet back corner of the library. He was a thin, perpetually nervous man who kept glancing over his shoulder. "My wife and I bought our retirement home here because we loved the quiet country feel," he explained sadly. "Then the Sterlings took over the HOA and turned it into an absolute dictatorship. Can you believe they fined us 3 times for our bird feeders?" Mr. Davis's recordings were utterly damning. In one particularly chilling segment, Brenda Sterling clearly stated, "Commissioner Vance guaranteed he can push through whatever paperwork we need. He owes Richard big time for that lake house deal last year." By that evening, our newly formed Willow Creek Property Rights Alliance had swelled to 37 members, including, crucially, 23 homeowners from inside the estates who were thoroughly fed up with the Sterlings' iron-fisted rule. Mrs. Peterson's grandson, Kevin, despite only having finished his 2nd year of law school, already knew enough to be genuinely dangerous to their operation. They violated at least 7 different procedural requirements just in forming the HOA itself, he explained passionately to our assembled group. And the required environmental impact assessment for the rezoning? It never actually happened, even though they filed official paperwork claiming it did. Kevin's research helped us find 2 experienced attorneys who generously agreed to take our case pro bono. This kind of blatant corruption makes all lawyers look bad, one of them stated firmly. We're filing for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning. While the legal battle officially began, I scraped together every penny I had left and took out a small loan to pay the exorbitant ransom for my animals. The county shelter was charging daily boarding fees that just kept growing relentlessly. When I finally arrived with the cash, the shelter manager looked genuinely embarrassed. "I'm really sorry about this whole mess," he whispered, leaning closer. "Those animals were clearly well cared for. This just isn't right." Bringing my animals to my friend's farm 30 miles away felt profoundly bittersweet. I couldn't take them fully home just yet, but at least they were finally out of that dreadful shelter. Buttercup, my sweet arthritic pony, nuzzled my neck gratefully when I hugged him goodbye. "Soon," I promised him, my voice thick with emotion. "We'll all go home soon." Our day in court arrived much faster than expected. The judge, an older woman with sharp, discerning eyes, reviewed our presented evidence meticulously. When Mr. Davis's secret recordings were played, her expression visibly darkened. "This court," she stated sternly, tapping her pen against the desk for emphasis, "is deeply disturbed by the evidence presented here today. Consequently, I am granting an emergency injunction, effective immediately, freezing all HOA actions against any property owners pending a full and thorough investigation. Furthermore," she added gravely, "I am referring this entire matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges." Brenda Sterling's face turned ghostly white. Richard Sterling stormed out of the courtroom in a fury, while their lawyer frantically shuffled through his papers in disbelief. That evening felt like the first real, tangible victory. With the injunction securely in place, I could finally bring my beloved animals home. My wonderful neighbors rallied around me, helping clean up the property and repair the fences the HOA's tow trucks had carelessly damaged during the seizure. Watching Buddy race joyfully around the pasture with the goats, while the chickens contentedly settled back into their familiar coop, felt like taking a deep breath after nearly drowning. Mrs. Peterson brought over fresh homemade bread. Mr. Davis and his wife helped rebuild the damaged chicken coop door. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly through the night. Then, a loud crash jolted me violently awake. Orange light flickered menacingly through my bedroom window. Smoke filled my lungs as I stumbled frantically to my feet. My barn, my beautiful, historic barn, was on fire. "My animals!" I screamed, rushing outside as huge flames lit up the night sky. The intense heat pushed me back as I desperately tried to reach the main doors. I could hear poor Buttercup whinnying in terror from inside. Suddenly, neighbors appeared as if from nowhere, garden hoses already in hand. Mr. Davis and 3 other men from down the road bravely smashed through a side door where the flames hadn't yet fully reached. I rushed in right behind them, grabbing startled chickens while they expertly led the larger, terrified animals out into the smoky night. Sirens wailed closer in the distance as we managed to get the very last goat to safety, just moments before the roof began to collapse. The fire department arrived with 3 trucks, working quickly and efficiently to contain the blaze before it could tragically spread to my house. My legs finally gave out, and I collapsed onto the cool grass, counting my animals through choked tears. "Everyone's safe, Ava," Mrs. Peterson soothed, wrapping a warm blanket around my trembling shoulders. Not a single animal lost. Shit. As dawn began to break, Fire Chief Miller approached me, his face grim. "This was no accident, Ava," he stated flatly. "We found clear evidence of accelerant used along the back wall." I think I know who did it," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "So do I," he replied cryptically, pointing up towards my roofline. "Those security cameras you installed after the towing incident, are they still working?" My heart leaped. I'd completely forgotten about the security system my cousin had helped me install just weeks before. The footage, thankfully, was crystal clear despite the darkness. And there he was, Richard Sterling, hoodie pulled up low, skulking away from my property at precisely 3:42 a.m. A red gas can, clearly visible, in his hand. He even glanced directly at one of the cameras for a split second before disappearing into the woods that connected our properties. When the police arrived later that morning to review the damning footage, they brought something entirely unexpected: a search warrant for the Sterling's home. Apparently, Megan Hayes' articles had prompted someone inside the county offices to bravely come forward with concrete proof that Commissioner Vance had been accepting bribes. "We found the matching gas can in their garage, Ava," Officer Garcia told me that afternoon. "It still had traces of accelerant that perfectly matches the sample taken from your barn. We arrested both Richard and Brenda Sterling about an hour ago." The news spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Commissioner Vance resigned that very same day, citing vague and sudden health concerns. The county board called an emergency session and voted unanimously to reverse the highly suspicious rezoning decision. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages of support and relief. Local businesses generously offered to donate materials to help rebuild my barn. A contractor from 3 towns over even volunteered his entire crew for the weekend. "My grandpa had a farm," he explained gruffly. "The developers pushed him right off his land. That's not happening to anyone else if I can help it." The criminal case against the Sterlings moved forward quickly, faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence. The recordings, the financial records, the video footage, the eyewitness accounts. Their lawyer pushed hard for a plea deal. Ultimately, they admitted guilt to charges including fraud, corruption, filing false documents, and arson. Richard Sterling received a 5-year prison sentence, while Brenda received 3 years plus extended probation. But something even more amazing happened within the Willow Creek Estates development itself. With the corrupt board forcibly removed, the homeowners called for a new community vote. The result stunned everyone. They voted overwhelmingly, 87% in favor of dissolving the HOA entirely. "We bought homes out here for the peaceful countryside, not to police each other's garden gnomes," explained the newly elected neighborhood representative, a kind retired teacher named Mr. Abernathy. "Truthfully, most of us hated those silly restrictive rules anyway." The rebuilding of my barn became an incredible community project. People I'd never even met before showed up spontaneously with tools, lumber, and food. Children happily helped paint the new walls a cheerful, bright red. Even the mayor stopped by, personally apologizing for the county's failure to protect longtime residents like me from predatory development practices. Within months of the fire, the barn stood complete, bigger, better, and stronger than before. We held a wonderful community picnic on my property to celebrate, and over 100 people attended. Kids laughed with delight as they fed carrots to my gentle miniature ponies. Families gathered fresh eggs from my newly rebuilt chicken coop. Mrs. Peterson enthusiastically taught a small group how to milk goats. The biggest surprise, however, came when Mr. Abernathy approached me holding an official-looking document. The homeowners of the former estates took up a collection, Ava, he explained, smiling warmly. We collectively bought the Sterling's forfeited property at the county auction after it was seized. I stared at him, utterly confused. And we're donating it, he continued, his smile widening, to be placed in a permanent land trust. It will become a community garden and an animal therapy space. We were hoping your wonderful ponies might agree to be regular visitors. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. 1 year later, my farm has transformed in ways I could never have possibly imagined. The heritage apple trees I planted along my property line, now secured with permanent agricultural protection status, are beginning to blossom beautifully. Mrs. Peterson teaches popular gardening classes twice weekly in my eastern field. The former HOA clubhouse, once a symbol of exclusion, has become a vibrant weekend farmers market where I sell fresh eggs and homemade goat milk soap. The Sterling's massive former corner lot now hosts heartwarming therapy sessions where children with disabilities experience the joy of riding my gentle ponies. Seniors from the nearby retirement home lovingly tend raised garden beds overflowing with fresh vegetables. The simple sign at the entrance now reads, Willow Creek Community Farm, all welcome. Sometimes, at sunset, I sit peacefully on my porch, with Buddy resting faithfully beside me, watching families stroll along the newly created walking paths that now connect all our properties. Children frequently stop to pet the friendly goats through the fence or help collect eggs under my watchful supervision. You know what the funny thing is, Ava? Mr. Davis remarked to me recently, leaning on the fence. They desperately wanted to kick you out just so they could build more houses and sell their hollow vision of a perfect community. Instead, he chuckled, they ended up creating something infinitely better by inadvertently bringing us all together to fight them. I smiled contentedly as I watched Buttercup patiently give pony rides to 3 delighted children nearby. The only community standard we need now is posted right there, I said, pointing towards the charming hand-painted sign hanging proudly by my freshly painted farm entrance. Be kind or leave. This story powerfully illustrates that even when faced with overwhelming odds, corruption, and intimidation, the strength of a united community, armed with truth and determination, can prevail against greed and injustice. Standing up for what's right, even when you feel small and isolated, can inspire others and lead to positive change far beyond what you initially thought possible. Never underestimate the power of collective action and unwavering perseverance. What are your thoughts on Ava's journey? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to stand up against unfair rules or powerful figures? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.